Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show tonight. My guest is Aidan Buzzetti, who's the Director of Operations at the Bull Moose Project. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I've seen a lot of buzz about the Bull Moose Project. I've seen the tweets. I've seen certain congressional candidates tweeting it out and commenting about it. So starting off, what is the Bull Moose Project?
Simply put, the Bull Moose Project is at its core a political action organization. We're filed with the FEC, but we were created with the goal to push the Republican Party to connect with its voters instead of its donors. A large part of our focus is continuing the populist movement that Donald Trump created when he launched his campaign in 2015.
And how did it come to be? Was it an organic process? Are you from a political action committee? What was the process like?
The process, well, I would say that it wasn't anything super structured at the beginning. It was mostly a portion of people who had the same goals, the same political beliefs, and we all eventually coalesced together and we said, this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to accomplish it. And we started that process.
And why do you think so many young conservatives have been moving more towards the populist center? Because I've seen the Bull Moose Project, I've seen one other organization that has more of a populist leaning. There does seem to be this renaissance happening right now of young populists that's coming out.
That's a good question. And I would say that I think it has a lot to do with cultural backlash.
Mm-hmm.
As we've seen the left move further left, and I think it's only natural for some people to look at that and take a step backwards and think, these people are pushing for, generally policies that don't align with what we think of America to be, and we want to not only go back to what America is, we want to prepare the country for the future.
And for people who are wondering, how do young conservatives do that? How do they push back? How do they try to create a different type of America? What is the Bull Moose Project's strategy going forward to have more engagement?
So our strategy is twofold. The first one, as a political action committee, we are able to endorse and organize on behalf of candidates. And that is one way that we plan to push our message, get people in Congress who agree with us. And the second way, especially for young people to get involved, is as an organization, the Bull Moose Project wants to get people to commit to participating in their local GOP organizations. A lot of these county GOPs or these state GOPs are starving of young people.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm a precinct officer in my county GOP, and I went to a convention and I was the only person there that was under 25.
Wow.
So there is a growing need or a growing realization among older Republicans that they need these young people to get involved, and that's one way that the Bull Moose Project wants to influence the future of the party.
And I saw on your website, on the Bull Moose Project website, there's a focus on the Rust Belt, on engaging voters there, on policies and messaging. That is something that young conservative establishment groups typically don't do. There doesn't seem to be a lot of Rust Belt engagement. Why did the Bull Moose Project prioritize that? Why do you see the Rust Belt as something that requires an even bigger push than what's happened previously?
Right. So the Rust stuff, we call it Rust rejuvenation, and it's rural, urban, and small town redevelopment. And this isn't just about young people. It's part of our young people message, but there is a core constituency among the Rust Belt, as we saw in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and even in 2020, even though the impact was a little bit different. These communities that have been totally decimated by companies going overseas. These communities that need reinvestment in their infrastructure, they need more population, and that's not something that young people can discount. We have the cost of living in suburbs and cities especially continue to go up and up and up, while young people are having trouble meeting those needs. And I mean, there are small towns that offer stipends. They
Right.
offer financial motivation for people, especially young people, to move there. So I wouldn't say it's just, I wouldn't say it's just something for older people to think about. I think that the Bull Moose Project focused on the Rust Belt to connect with older people who have the same ideological leanings, but also try and push young people to realize we can't abandon these areas in the future. Many young people come from the urban areas or the suburban areas, but we can't forget, the people who live outside of that.
And because I've been looking at various young conservative groups, I've seen the more establishment type groups, they're not talking about targeting specific areas as much as they're talking about targeting specific ideas or overarching beliefs. So, what are the overarching beliefs for the Bull Moose Project that dictate its values or dictate how it goes about its business?
So one of the overarching beliefs is what I said earlier, the Rust rejuvenation, which is really focused on bringing back opportunity to rural areas, small towns, and even some dilapidated urban areas, and improving infrastructure. Some other core beliefs that the Bull Moose Project has is conservation. Uh, and we look at conservation not just as protecting the environment, but also as preserving the natural beauty that the United States has and has always had. We're also very pro family. We've seen divorce rates go up, hundreds of percent. In the last couple decades, we've seen the number of children per family drop. The Bull Moose Project really looks at the family as a core aspect of our societal structure. And we think that a large portion of our problems as a country and as a society come from the family slowly disappearing. And then I guess the last thing is that we're very focused on a fair free market. And that means we want to make it easier to start and maintain a small business. We want to attack these corporations, these monopolies that make it harder for people to break into the workforce or break into the economy as business owners.
And I know that a lot of young conservatives, there's always infighting in young conservatism. It can get very nasty. But what we need to be focusing on is what is going to get the most engagement with young voters going into 2022 and eventually 2024. What have you found through your interactions and just your work daily? What is the topic or the issue that is getting a lot of traction with young voters, maybe even young voters who were not traditionally Republicans last time?
I would say definitely one of the biggest overarching issues that seems to get traction, and it's not just from young people, it's from regular Republicans as well. People who believe strongly in Reagan. It's the culture war. The
Mm-hmm.
culture war seems to be the uniting factor behind all conservatives now, except for maybe the Never Trump conservatives, and it especially has pushed younger people in favor of conservatism and the Republican Party. Um, I would say the culture war has definitely pushed me to where I am now. I think it's more productive in some ways, but I know plenty of people who started out as libertarians
Right.
or maybe traditional Reagan conservatives, and they look at what's going on. They see all of these cultural issues being pushed from the left, and they take a look at their own beliefs and they see there's nothing there to stop it, and then
Right.
they have a political realization and they move towards what the Bull Moose projects and other populists stand for.
And I think that's an interesting point because adults are not always aware in conservatism how much of an ideological battle is currently going on in the young conservative world between people who want to talk about the culture war and people who don't. Do you think that the culture war is, even though it's an engaging issue, is it something that can be part of a platform for someone like Ron DeSantis in 24, or if Trump ran again, or Josh Hawley? Is it a strong enough issue to measure up to the economy or healthcare?
I do believe so. The culture war at face value may not be, but there are ways to tie in the culture war to policies that rely on economics. And economics used to be the reliable standard for determining how people are going to vote. That's
Right.
changed over the last few cycles, but when you look at the culture war, people have issues with transgender people in sports, and abortion has evolved into a culture war issue. There's you can name any number of topics, but you can always frame culture war issues as an attack on the family. And then you can propose issues to rebuild the family and stop this decay. And that's where child tax credits come in. That's where some people who support UBI come in. So there are ways of framing the culture war within a broader economic policy. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges, but also a winning platform.
And for young conservatives who are not part of any group, because there are quite a few young conservatives who are sort of homeless in finding a group within young conservatism, what does the Bull Moose Project offer in terms of engagement? Is there some sort of mentorship? Is there some sort of community that's developing? Because oftentimes in conservatism, we don't have that aspect, whereas young liberal groups do.
Right, and that's a completely fair assessment. The Bull Moose Project is working on a few partnerships with other organizations, and we are developing our own grassroots program to help people organize on the ground, get everyone face to face, so they not only come out in support of candidates who are populists, but they also meet like-minded populists. And there are also plenty of populist organizations that do provide mentorship and things like that. And I am confident that the Bull Moose Project will work on something similar in the future.
And do you think, just as a young conservative, do you think that adults in conservatism are aware of sort of the battle that's going on in young conservatism? Because sometimes I talk to people and they don't believe that anyone could just not be on the same page right now in young conservatism.
I think there are small hints, um, but a lot of the young conservative movement is online.
Right.
And that's where most of the ideological argument is. Many young Republican organizations are, I would say, more traditional
Mm-hmm.
Republican, which does make it kind of difficult for the adults to see the changes that are taking place, because local parties and state parties, they only interact with college Republican
Right.
clubs or young Republican clubs. And I can't speak for every single one of them, obviously, but many are still, socially liberal, fiscally conservative. The Reagan
Right.
stuff.
And for people who are wondering about issues like cryptocurrency and those issues that are sort of, for young people, they're very dominant. For young people, they kind of are the new wave of issues away from traditional things like healthcare or the economy. Is the Bull Moose Project going to be discussing crypto or discussing student debt, things that get young people more involved in the political voting process?
I don't know if the Bull Moose Project will address cryptocurrency. I know we have discussed student debt before.
Mm-hmm.
Any changes to our platform is decided by a group of people. We're all very populist, but we have different opinions. I would say, we are a very blended populist organization. So when it comes to specific issues, we are still developing our
Mm-hmm.
platform. We're doing research on specific things. We all recognize that student debt is a killer. It's a killer for young families. It's a
Mm-hmm.
killer for young people in general. So I definitely could see tying in a student debt solution to our pro-family policy.
And for people who are wondering, a lot of adults wonder why populism has become sort of the new thing in young conservatism, why it's expanding so fast. Why do you think that populism has been growing so fast in young conservatism? And is it a sustainable thing? Is it going to keep going all the way to 2024?
Populism is so popular because I think the political class, or the general elite class, has totally lost touch with reality. In my opinion, they've totally lost touch with the country, and young people are generally more liberal, but they're the growing sect of DSA, the very extreme uh, progressive types are pushing everyone to the side.
Right.
And adults are realizing that. They look at academics and they see, academics is a very closed environment. And, my parents were worried when I went off to college, are you going to come back a liberal? That stuff is a growing concern for older people, and I think younger people experienced it first. They realize these people are totally out of touch, and young people, I think, in general, regardless of political affiliation, have this sense of when it's our turn to take up the mantle, we're going to be totally screwed. So we
Right.
need to work to solve these issues now, even if it comes at the expense of breaking the traditional structure of clawing your way to the top over years and years and years. It's We want our elites to listen. We want them to push policies that benefit the country, and I think that's why populism is so popular.
And because oftentimes you have to break the system in politics to get anything done, what has the reception been like with young people for the Bull Moose Project? Have you received pushback or a lot of congratulations? What's happening there?
We've gotten a lot of congratulations from other young people from Republican organizations who have the same message, which is awesome.
Hmm.
But when it comes to dealing with the established political world, they, one, don't like populist organizations,
Hmm.
and two, they don't take young people seriously.
Right.
So it's always a difficult process to get support from people who are already established. We're working on our connections. We've endorsed Joe Kent recently. We
Right.
have a few others under consideration that we're talking to right now, and it's really for the Bull Moose Project, and I'm assuming for many other populist organizations that are dominated by young people. Right now, we're in a battle for political legitimacy above anything else.
And why do you think so many adults in conservatism don't take young people seriously? Because on the left side, someone can be 22 and be a major strategist for the DNC or for a Democrat candidate. Bernie had major strategists who were all under 25. Even Joe Biden really tapped into that youth market and gave young people responsibility. So why is it on the conservative side we struggle so hard to get recognition or have trust in us from adults?
I think it comes down to a flaw in conservatism. We put hierarchy at the very top of our thinking. There's a process to do things. It's the way it's always been. And I think that is especially true for older conservatives. Younger conservatives, populists, they're more willing to break the cycle in order to restore the cycle. Older conservatives tend to be very set in their ways. They say, we've done this before, you need to trust us, um, when they're totally out of touch in many places. And it's just hard to break through, especially if you don't have any support at all. Figures like Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance and Blake Masters, they have, in my opinion, the ability to be kingmakers on the
Right.
populist side of the Republican Party. If they come out and they start helping young people or putting young people in the spotlight in some way, I think we will slowly start to see that shift. But I mentioned earlier that the Bull Moose Project really wants to get people and younger people involved in their local parties, their county parties. And like it or not, that's where most of the organizing is done, especially if you want to get down into state level politics. We've seen Ron DeSantis has been a tremendous governor, and they've really connected, or he's really connected with both the elites and the voters to create this fusion of populism that doesn't immediately draw disgust
Right.
from the people that are sitting in power right now. And yeah, like I said, like it or not, the county parties, the local politics, that's where most of the stuff is made. That's where you meet the state reps, the state senators, and they're all filled with old people. They all have their own petty arguments,
Right, right,
and they, like I said, they will sit down and they'll say, we've organized for these people, we've pushed for these policies for the last 30 to 40 years. You weren't even alive yet. You don't know how
right.
things are done, and we're not going to listen to you. And that's something that needs to change.
And that's a really important point because I'm sure you know this. A lot of young conservatives think local politics starts with a mayor's race or a state senator race, and there are different levels to that. Just sort of to wrap up, do you think that young conservatism has been remiss in getting involved in those precinct areas and that really deep local politics? And if so, why?
I wouldn't necessarily say remiss. I think that young people just don't know.
Yeah,
Even old people or older people don't know about their local parties. So I wouldn't put the burden of not being involved on young people. I think that the parties and the people in charge of them have done an awful job across the board of reaching out to people. I think it's completely fair to think that local politics starts with city council and mayor and state representative, because that's true. Um, but it's very difficult to get involved in local politics because they tend to be very insular, number
yes.
one, and it can be very clicky. And there's all these events that go on that people just may not know about. So I would put the blame on the party structure instead of the young people for not getting involved.
Yeah, I think that's true. It can be very sort of mean girlish when you get into it on the precinct level. Just in closing, what do you think is the vision for the Bull Moose Project for 2024? What as an organization do you want to see happen to the party?
As an organization, the Bull Moose Project is really aiming to get America First populist candidates into Congress.
Hmm.
That's definitely our main goal. We want to see that federal representation. Um, but by 2024, I think we want to be able to say we have organized um, young people to join parties and campaigns in these areas, and it's contributed to these specific victories. You
Hmm.
know, if we could get a team of 20 people to go out and knock doors or hand out flyers in a specific congressional district where we've endorsed somebody and they win, that is a win across the board. Um, we're not a super PAC. We can't raise unlimited money.
Right.
So we have to be very concentrated in where we go, and we want to be able to say at the end of our cycles, we've endorsed these people, and all of these people have won. That's where we
Yeah.
want our influence to be.
And I think that's a good benchmark to have going in 2022 and 2024. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow you on social media to stay up to date with your work?
Yeah, on Twitter, Aiden Buzzetti, AIDENBUZZETTI. That's where I'll be the most.
Perfect. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.